Hello, my name is John Richards, and I'll be presenting my research proposal tonight. My research topic was on scientific project-based learning for English language learners in a science classroom. My introduction, so just a little bit of background on the issue, is there's been an increase of English language learners in the United States, and particularly in California, and we need better educational strategies for these ELLs. There's been an achievement gap, and we want to do what we can to adjust our practices so that we can support those ELLs. And that's the purpose of this study, is to really support that growing population of ELLs and better suit their educational needs. The significance of this paper is that we want to develop those practices, and so we need to do research to determine in what ways we can implement and make modifications to the practices that we have in order to suit those English language learners. So I have two research questions. My first question is, what aspects of project-based learning are effective for English language learners in regards to a scientific curriculum? These could be things like, the group collaboration. Is that positive for English language learners, or is that negative for English language learners? The real world experience component of it. Do English language learners do well with that? So there are a lot of aspects of project-based learning that we want to kind of see how they will affect English language learners. And then also, what adaptations can be made to make project-based learning to better support English language learners, and particularly in developing their academic language in the scientific classroom, because that is a big stumbling block for all students, is that that academic language. So when I reviewed the literature on this, I found a lot of benefits of project-based learning. Project-based learning really gets students engaged, gets students excited about the projects that they're doing. It gives gives students the hands-on experience, which is really important. Another way to implement a UDL principle is this hands-on experience, and it gives students the ability to and the opportunity to collaborate with their peers. So project-based learning in a science classroom is, I feel, particularly critical. It makes the science relatable to real-world experiences. So you'll be doing projects and approaching it much the same way real scientists would, and applying what you've learned to answer those real-world questions. And it kind of shows how science is actually used. There was a study done by Hahn where he looked at 836 school students in a STEM curriculum, and he noticed that Hispanic students, their growth rate was significantly increased due to the implementation of project-based learning. So if it had a positive effect on these Hispanic students, that's something that we want to investigate. We want to find out why project-based learning is beneficial. Also looked at the project-based learning for English language learners specifically. It provides strong visuals, which help the English language learners. It gives them opportunities to practice their language, and helps them develop the academic language, which is really tough for all students to develop. There was a study, Enhancing English Skills Through Project-Based Learning, by Panpoon, where he found that it increased the four domains: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And there was another study by Texas A&M where they found that hands-on instruction makes scientific understanding more accessible for English language learners. That hands-on experience is, these two things are things that we want to focus on. So another thing that we looked at was teacher experiences. and the lesson plans that they had. And I looked at this because I wanted to get a sense of what modifications they were making for ELLs. A lot of these, unfortunately, were not in a science classroom, but I think a lot of these things still apply. They put a lot of emphasis on vocabulary, things like front-loading the vocabulary and looking at vocabulary first. I think that this vocabulary really is kind of a sticking spot for a lot of students in general, English language learners including. And so focusing on how we can make modifications to make vocabulary easier for English language learners would be really beneficial. Another thing I looked at was groupings, how students are grouped together for project-based learning. I found that if you group two students that speak the same native language, that can be advantageous, particularly if one has a higher proficiency level than the other. The higher proficiency level can actually support the lower proficiency level. Also, Williams and McClure studied that you could use older students to help younger students. Typically, the older students have more language development, and so they can help those younger students through the project-based learning activities. We also want to make sure that we're supporting the culture of our ELLs and bilinguals. We want to continue them, respecting their culture, respecting their language, and allowing them to keep developing their secondary or their primary and secondary language simultaneously. So how am I going to do this? My methodology, first of all, I want to find a school district that has, a few science teachers and classrooms that I can get into, and get permission from the school district and recruit the science teachers to participate in this. It's good, I think that this will be easy to do because, we're trying to make things better. And so we're going to acquire information to make the, better curriculum decisions. And so after we do that, we've got to get the parents on board, let the parents know. We're going to be collecting video data and using students' work as data. And so we want the parents to be aware of what's going on. So we'll send permission slips out for that. Then the teachers are going to implement a project-based learning in their classroom at least every 2 weeks. Some sort of project-based learning, and this can range from smaller projects to bigger projects, different time periods and things like that, but at least one every 2 weeks for this study. Then we're going to gather data, every 2 weeks. Well, the teachers will be gathering data, on their students every day, but they'll submit it every 2 weeks on how the English language learners are doing. Initially, we want to get some initial data on the students as the teachers get to know them. What are their ages? What kind of background do they come from? What is their native language? How long have they lived in the United States? Things like that. So that we can kind of look for trends in that data later. But we want to focus on, their students' progress. Is the project-based learning helping them progress? Are they developing their language? And then we want to look at the project-based strategies. Is this being effective for our English language learners, or is it not being effective? And we want to look at, specific aspects of project-based learning. As we go, we're going to make modifications to our project-based learning model to better suit our students. So we're going to keep track of the modifications and adaptations that we're making, and we're going to see, observe their effectiveness. Did we make a change? Was it effective or not? So we're going to keep track of all those things. The next thing we want to do is to meet as a professional learning community to monthly reflect and adapt our strategies, make those modifications. So the teachers and I will meet with in this professional learning community to discuss how the students are doing. What are they being successful with? What are they struggling with? What elements of project-based learning are effective? What elements are they struggling with? And I feel like meeting together as a professional learning community is just a good practice. And I think building that in to this research is going to really help us create good modifications and really figure out what is best for English language learners. So that's built in. And during those professional learning communities, we are going to review the video evidence. We're going to look at that to see what's working, what's not working, and also the student work as well, to look at some elements of the student's writing and how that's progressing. So we want to take all that into consideration when just making decisions as what modifications we're going to do as we move forward. And so we're going to kind of continue this cycle for a whole semester, for 4 months. The study is going to last for 4 months, and we'll be looking at the student's performance, submitting that data, meeting as a PLC, and making modifications and observing how those modifications pan out, whether they're effective or ineffective. And we're going to continue doing that. And we could continue, all the way, with the students going into the next science class if we wanted to extend the study. We're going to look for trends in that performance. Do all of our students that we're studying, do they all benefit from, the vocabulary modifications, or do they all benefit from the student collaboration, or do they struggle with the student collaboration? What kind of things are working for our students, and what's not working for our students? The student interviews that the teachers are going to conduct periodically as part of the data that they're collecting. We want to consider that because we want project-based learning to be a positive experience for the students. And so we don't want, if project-based learning is something that's stressing them out, we don't want to do it. So we want to make sure that we do conduct some student interviews to make sure that it's, it's a positive thing for them, and that, they can express their views on it as well. And then, once we've drawn the conclusions, we're going to check those results of the study, those conclusions, with the teachers. I think, it's important to verify our findings. Say, okay, I feel like, we can say this about this modification. The modification for vocabulary is really working. Did you, can you verify that? So I think it's important to do that with the teachers. And then we can present these things to administrators and let them know, hey, this is what we need in our classrooms. We need project-based learning that implements these modifications to support our English language learners. And that's the idea, is to modify, what we can do to the curriculum based on the knowledge that we've gained. Some of my reactions, I think that we are going to discover what modifications are going to be best for project-based, or for implementing project-based learning for ELLs. I think we can do that. I think that project-based learning, will help to close this achievement gap, and we really want to do that. Right now, the curriculum isn't aligned with what the needs of our students are, because we have that achievement gap. And so I think once we learn more about how to implement project-based learning for ELLs, we can better align the curriculum with what the students' needs are. Some implications for future research is that, like I was talking about before, is that we could carry out this study long term to see if that achievement gap closes. And we could also, apply the same methodology, but to different disciplines. See, does this work for social studies, for implementing project-based learning in a social studies class with the modifications that we proved were best for ELLs? How does that work in those different disciplines? And then, do these modifications benefit all students? If we do something that benefits English language learners, but it doesn't work so well for mainstream students, we don't want to create more problems. So we want to maybe do a little check and monitor the mainstream students as well, to just make sure that the what we've implemented is beneficial for all students. Okay. Some reflections on the critical friend aspect. Critical friend, like talking out your ideas, at least for me, is really valuable. And that led to my critical friend had some really good insights that I hadn't thought of before. And some things that I could add or get rid of. And yeah, it led to some good realizations for how I should proceed and what kind of things that I then needed to do. Particularly with these classes, getting the input from my critical friend, during a short work week, so that I could actually input it into, whatever it was we were working on, was, hectic. You really had to be on it to make sure you got stuff done early, so that you could submit it to your critical friends, so that you could get that input back and then make those changes. But overall, critical friend was a great thing, a really positive thing. The personal implications of this study. This is probably a study that I'm going to conduct small scale on my own. Again, I wanted to have that larger scale to, the more numbers you have, the stronger your data is. But this is something that I will probably do in my own classroom, and make modifications, talk about them with the PLC, make new changes, and kind of track the progress of my ELL students to see how they're doing. So that's something that I want to do in my classroom. And then, I'm going to share that with, the teachers that are surrounding me, and kind of bounce ideas off of other people to refine my methods and share my knowledge eventually. Yeah. And here are some references. And that's it. Thank you very much.